In this video, I'm presenting a software keyboard UI to enter chord symbols. I've been thinking a lot about the problem of chord symbols, both to represent them in code and as a UI. There's a lot of complexity associated with the notation that we use. The chords are not orthogonal. That means that you can't just use any combinations of the different symbols that we use. For example, an augmented chord that would be flat 5 at the same time makes no sense because augmented implies a sharp 5. You would use a different notation if you wanted both the flat 5 and the sharp 5. Or you couldn't have a diminished chord that's also a 13th chord, because in a diminished chord, the 7th is doubly flattened, so it would be the same as the 13th. Another complexity is that there are various ways of representing some chords, let alone the fact that you could say sus4 7 and 7 sus4, it would be the same, but you could also say half diminished versus minor or flat 2, or you could use 2 instead of add 9, and those would kind of all have the same meaning. In some contexts they might involve different voicings, but it's not really clear how wide-ranging the notation is. So here I'm suggesting a solution, and here's how it works. First, on the left side, there's a keyboard to enter the root, and that's very simple. You can only select one of them. So here I'm selecting them. I'm not offering the enharmonic, so there's no F flat, for example. So let's stick with B flat. Next, there is the quality. Now the term quality has many different uses, and mine is not the most common one, certainly. Usually, quality might involve everything, including the extensions and alterations. So, for example, a minor 7 flat 9 chord, that might be a quality. In my case, I'm understanding quality to mean it's like a term that's going to affect the third and the fifth of the triad. And I'm also not including a major quality, because I think major is a bit of a tricky one. When you have major in a chord, it's actually right associative, meaning that if you have B flat major 7, it's not the B flat. You're not saying, the major is not saying that B flat is major. It was already major before you put the major over there. It's saying that the 7th extension is a major 7th. So I consider that a major triad is just in its default quality rather than being in an explicit major quality. And this is why I don't have a button for major. So I can go and toggle between the different qualities or remove them. Then I have extension. The extension is basically the top of the tertian stack, meaning that we have the root, the third, the fifth, and then you can add 7th, 9th, 11th, 13th. And when you add a 9th, it implies the 7th. When you add an 11th, it implies the one below. There's some voicing exceptions to this, but that's the way I understand it, or I think it's the best way to represent it. Now, extensions can be dominant, regular, or major. They can also be diminished in the case of a diminished 7 chord, but that is a bit of an exception. Otherwise, it's either dominant or major. And here I'm including also half-diminished, which is a bit of an odd beast. It functions like a 7th, but also impacts the 3rd and the 5th. If you notice in this program, I actually cannot use half diminished if I've already selected equality. So if I'm minor, I cannot be half diminished at the same time. That would make no sense. It's only once I have no quality that I can be half diminished. And last are alterations. And I understand alterations as being modifications to the tones that are already implied by the quality and the extension. And I've grouped them in 6 categories. First is the third, and I'm including sus2 and sus4 in that group because they're basically no third plus a different one, the fourth or the second. Then there's the fifth, no fifth, flat 5, sharp 5, 9th, add 9, flat 9, sharp 9, 11th, add 11, sharp 11. I didn't include flat 11. Maybe there are cases where you can have minor flat 11, but I think that's a bit far-fetched. And then here's 6th. it actually becomes 13 if you select something. So in the case you could have 7 flat 13, but usually you would notate that as just flat 6 if you didn't have the 7, so that's the way I have it in there. And finally you have Alt, which is only available if you have a 7 chord. So the 7 Alt is here. It should have it in Alt there. It looks like I have a bug. So the interesting thing in there is that it's all applied from left to right. The root, then the quality, extension, and then all of those groups of alterations. And so you see things are becoming black and or disabled as I change the selection. For example, if I have minor, now you see you can't have a half diminished. You can have minor for half diminished, that makes no sense. You can't have a sus chord that's also minor. Maybe that's debatable, but I think it's not really sensible. Let's add a 7 in there. Now notice, once I have minor, I can't have sharp 9 because the minor implies a minor third, and sharp 9 would be the same tone. So that makes no sense. I also cannot have just add 9. And why is that? Because 7 add 9 is actually the same as 9 chord. And that's a better notation for it, so that's why I don't allow using 7 add 9. In the same case, I can't say 9 add 11, but I could change it to 11. So let's make another example. Let's just have a 9 chord, dominant 9. You see that the sus2 is unavailable now because the 2 would be the same as the 9th, so it wouldn't make sense as a notation. You would remove 9th or making it a 7 and then add the sus2. Sus4 is okay because there's no 11th. If you had 11th, then you couldn't do sus4. And you also cannot add 11 because then it would become an 11th chord and you would be better annotating it 11. So that's the little program I did. I think it's interesting to play with it and see what combinations are possible or impossible, or what makes sense and makes no sense. You can have flat 9 and sharp 9 at the same time, for example, but other variations are not possible. So here it is. Thanks.